If you grew up in or around church, you know that we Christians have a tendency to glamorize, sanitize, and romanticize both the people and the stories of Scripture. Maybe it's why some of you walked away from church or let go of your faith. You just couldn't relate to the stories that you read, and you felt like you couldn't live up to these idolized, romanticized versions of Jesus followers that were presented. Now, the good news is you have more in common with people in Scripture than you realize, because they're not appropriate for children parts to most everybody's story in Scripture. Or to say it another way, the Scriptures are full of stories of sinners like me and sinners like you. And you don't need to feel the pressure to remove the rough edges or explain away the challenging parts of those stories, because the Bible is not primarily a collection of moral lessons, although there are plenty of them in the documents. The Bible is primarily history. To be more specific, it's His story. It's ancient history with a divine purpose. It's the story of how God's story intersects with your story and with mine. And that intersection is so personal. It's sometimes uncomfortable because it's not glamorized, sanitized, or romanticized. It's real, it's gritty, it's messy, it's powerful, and full of regrets and redemption. So let's explore together on this edition of Journey at Home. So thanks for tuning in. We want to make it simple for you to follow Jesus, and I think this new Christmas series, Sinners and Scandals, will help because we're going to explore the Christmas story they never told you about. If you asked me to give you the story of Christmas, here's how I'd describe it. God made everything perfect. Humans broke it. God waded in to fix it. God became a human to do it. And God chose to become one of us and live perfectly among us, suffer like us, and ultimately die like us to clean up our mess. So instead of trying to tame or reframe the stories, maybe we should just appreciate the fact that God chose to wade into this mess of sinners like us with scandals like ours and bring hope and healing and good news to all of us. And this is what Matthew believed. Matthew is one of Jesus' friends. He knew Jesus' mother, Mary, and he wrote one of our 4 biographical accounts of Jesus' life that describes the moment God took on human flesh. And you would have thought these would be the first words of his account, okay? This is how the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, came about. His mother, Mary, was pledged to be married to Joseph. And then after that, he would just tell all the details of what happened, right? And this is how you'd expect him to start the account, but he doesn't. Instead, he begins by listing Jesus' family tree, and he did this for a couple of reasons. One, he wanted to assure his Jewish readers that Jesus was in fact their Messiah, their long-awaited king. So he starts with Abraham, and then he traces Jesus' lineage through King David all the way down to Joseph, the husband of Mary. Now, if you've ever read it, you've probably thought, this is kind of boring. Can we get on with the story? But these 40 generations in the family tree are part of the story. And in listing them, Matthew does something extraordinary. He decides along the way to highlight all the scandals and sinners that are a part of the family tree of Jesus. This had to feel highly inappropriate in a Jewish culture that prided itself on morality and law-keeping. But Matthew had been with Jesus for 3 years, and he knew Jesus didn't glamorize, sanitize, or romanticize any of the checkered past from the past. And scandals like this and sinners like you and me are the whole reason that he came here. So here's how Matthew actually starts his version of the Christmas story. He says this: "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers." Jewish readers immediately knew this story. Jacob had 12 sons who became the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. But if I'd been God, I wouldn't have chosen for Jesus to come from Judah's tribe. I'd have chosen the younger brother, Joseph. He was the good kid. He grew up and he saved his family from a famine. I'd have picked him. But God chose Judah. It's like God chose the worst one. Judah was the brother who had the idea to sell his younger brother Joseph into slavery. And Matthew's readers knew that. They also knew that wasn't the only terrible thing that Judah did. Matthew even highlights it. He writes this next: "Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar." Tamar is the first mother mentioned in this list because Matthew's referencing a scandal right from the beginning of this biography of Jesus' life that really nobody would have wanted to have mentioned. You never heard this in Sunday school probably, so let me tell you about it. 1,500 years before Jesus' birth, Genesis 18 writes this: Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. I mean, this is how you did it back then. You just went and picked out a woman for your son. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death. Now, there's no context or explanation to this, but Er's dead. So Judah then takes Er's wife Tamar, who hasn't had any kids yet, and gives her to his second son Onan to be his wife. Now, this happened because they had a cultural law back then that only allowed Tamar to marry and have a child with someone in her first husband's family. But Onan doesn't want to have a baby with Tamar, and he does some pretty disrespectful things to prevent that from happening, but then he dies. So then Judah promises Tamar that she'll marry his youngest son, Shelah, to keep up with the culture's laws. And problem is, Shelah is way too young to be married right now, so Judah sends Tamar home, live as a widow with her father until Shelah grows up. Now, years pass. Judah's wife dies. Shelah grows up, and Tamar realizes Judah isn't going to follow through. So now she's hurt and angry and ready to get back at Judah. So she comes up with a plan. She hears Judah is headed to a town called Timnah, where all his sheep will get sheared. So she disguises herself as a prostitute, puts a veil over her face, goes to the town of Enam, which is kind of on the way to Timnah, and waits for Judah. Now remember, they haven't seen each other in several years, long time. And Judah comes into the gate of the city, and Tamar is waiting for him, gets his attention, and Judah says to her, not knowing that it's Tamar, "Come now, let me sleep with you." Now, before you start sending emails or comments about how this is just too mature for church, let me remind you, this is in the Christmas story. I mean, you can blame Matthew, who put it there, not me. Tamar haggles with Judah over the price to sleep with him. And Judah's like, "Well, I didn't bring any money with me." So he promises her, "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. Hey, but Tamar's not dumb. So she says this, "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. Like, I need proof. I need some collateral. I need some kind of assurance that you're going to pay me. And he said, "Well, what pledge should I give you?" And so she answers, "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand." Translation, just leave me your passport, your driver's license, and a credit card. So he sleeps with her. He heads back on his trip, gets home, and sends a young goat back to Enoth. The problem is, when his servant gets there with the goat, nobody's even heard of this woman, and they don't have any prostitutes living in their city. And so the servant has to go back and tell Judah, and he's like, "Well, I mean, change your credit card number and get a new driver's license because I tried to find her. She's not there." And 3 months pass, and someone sends word to Judah that Tamar has engaged in prostitution and that she's pregnant. Well, how do you think Judah responds? The guy who sold his brother to slave traders, the guy who broke his promise to Tamar, the guy who slept with a prostitute. Here's what Judah said: "Bring her out and have her burned to death." Anybody going to read this part of the story on Christmas tree this year? I didn't think so. It's like, Matthew, why are you bringing this up with the story of Jesus' birth? Because they grab Tamar, they drag her out to burn her, and she sends this message to Judah in this moment: "I am pregnant by the man who owns these things. See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." And then Judah sees it, and he realizes he's guilty, and he has to drop all the charges. And Tamar has twin boys, Perez and Zerah. And Perez ends up being part of the line of Jesus. So Matthew tells us, Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. And on the lineage goes. Why would Matthew make such a big deal of this scandal in the telling of the birth of Jesus? I think it's because he wanted us to know that God used the worst of the worst to introduce the best of the best. Jesus didn't shy away from sinners, and he didn't run away from messes. He came from sinners for sinners like you and me. He doesn't distance himself from those of us, no matter how bad we've messed up. Now you think, I think this was why it was so personal to Matthew. I mean, because he was one of the worst that Jesus had chosen. Matthew had been a tax collector for Rome, a traitor to his Jewish people. When Jesus had walked by his office one day, and here's what Jesus said to him. He said, "Follow me." And Matthew knew nobody else would possibly want him around. Everywhere he went, he experienced disgust and contempt from his own people. but not from Jesus. So Matthew got up and followed him. And when the people watching Jesus couldn't understand why he'd ever invite a guy like Matthew, Jesus made it really simple. He said, "For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." So Matthew, I think, includes all of this in the Christmas story because he wants us to know we have two things in common with him. Like Matthew, you're a sinner. And like Matthew, you're invited just as you are to follow Jesus. And like Matthew, if you choose to follow, you will change because following Jesus makes you more like Jesus. Your life will get better and you'll be better at living life. That thing you wish you could change about your behavior, your reactions, your thoughts, it can change because when you follow Jesus, his Spirit lives inside you and empowers and enables the change in you if you'll cooperate with him. So you have hope, and I have hope for a better life because God used the worst of the worst to introduce the best of the best. And the best of the best wasn't just born as a baby for you. He lived a perfect life, then died a sinless death for you. He paid a debt he didn't owe and that you couldn't pay, and he paid it on your behalf. So your checkered past doesn't need to define you. But Matthew's not done with the story. He's just getting started. And we'll pick up the Christmas story right there in episode 2 of Sinners and Scandals.